Imagine a world where gods walk among men, where the sun itself is a living force battling darkness every night, and where kings are not just rulers, but divine beings chosen by fate. This is not just mythology. It is the foundation of one of the most powerful civilizations in history. Egyptian mythology is more than just ancient stories. It's a world of betrayal, war, resurrection, and gods who shape the destiny of an empire. But what if I told you that many of these stories are far darker, far more complex than you ever imagined? Everyone knows the names: Ra, Osiris, Horus, Seth, Anubis, Bastet. But do you know the truth behind them? Do you know how Seth's betrayal wasn't just about power, but about the very balance of the universe? Or how Ra, the supreme god, was nearly overthrown by his own creation? Or that the afterlife was not just a peaceful paradise, but a perilous journey where a single misstep could mean total annihilation? For centuries, pharaohs ruled with the belief that they were living gods, direct descendants of Horus himself. But what if I told you that their claim to divinity wasn't just politics? It was rooted in an epic war between gods, a war that lasted for 80 years, and that the battle for Egypt's throne was so intense that even the gods themselves couldn't agree on a winner? In this video, we are diving deep into the essential myths of Egyptian mythology, unraveling the hidden truths behind the most legendary figures of ancient Egypt. From Ra's eternal battle against chaos, to Anubis weighing the hearts of the dead, from Osiris's gruesome fate to Bastet's divine protection. These are not just stories, they are the very essence of life, death, and the afterlife. But beware, what you're about to discover may change everything you thought you knew about Egypt's gods. Are you ready to uncover the secrets that have been buried for millennia? Creation of the universe. In the vast and intricate world of Egyptian mythology, the universe was not born in an instant, but emerged from chaos itself. In the beginning, there was nothing but a dark, swirling ocean known as Nun, a limitless abyss, silent and endless. But from this primordial sea, something miraculous happened. A single mound of land, Ben, rose above the waters. Picture it like the first island appearing after a great flood, a beacon of creation in an ocean of void. And atop this sacred mound, Ra, the supreme sun god, came into existence, radiating light where there was only darkness. His very presence was the dawn of order in a world that had none. But Ra was not meant to rule alone. His very breath would shape the world to come. From Ra's essence came his firstborn, Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, the goddess of moisture. They were more than mere deities. They were the very forces that would allow life to flourish. Think about it. Without air to breathe and moisture to sustain, no life could exist. Shu and Tefnut ventured into the void, bringing balance to the world, but their journey was treacherous. Imagine losing sight of your children in a vast desert with no map to guide them back. That was Ra's sorrow when they disappeared into the endless darkness of the abyss. His tears, shed in grief, would give rise to something even greater, humanity itself. But why did Ra's tears turn into people? In Egyptian mythology, emotions were powerful, creative forces. Just as love and loss can shape human destiny, Ra's sorrow birthed the first humans, flawed yet divine reflections of the gods. When Shu and Tefnut finally returned, the world had already begun to take shape. They, in turn, gave birth to two more powerful deities, Geb, the god of the earth, and Nut, the goddess of the sky. Their presence set the stage for what would become the most legendary divine family in history. But there was a problem. These two were deeply in love, and their embrace threatened to halt creation itself. Ra, now an all-seeing ruler, could not allow this closeness to persist. If the earth and sky remained locked together, no space would exist for life to thrive. So he commanded Shu, the god of air, to separate them, pushing Nut high above, so that her body would form the heavens while Geb remained below as the land. If you've ever gazed at the night sky and felt an inexplicable longing, Perhaps it is the ancient memory of this divine separation. But from this divide came the cycle of life. Nut would swallow the sun each night, and Ra would be reborn with the dawn, ensuring that existence itself continued in an eternal loop. However, creation was far from complete. Nut and Geb had 4 children who would change the fate of both gods and mortals forever: Osiris, Isis, Seth, and Nephthys. Each would come to represent an essential part of existence: Osiris as life and renewal, Isis as magic and motherhood, Seth as chaos and destruction, and Nephthys as the silent guardian of the dead. But before they could fulfill their destinies, Ra's reign over the world had to come to an end. As the gods grew stronger, Ra, who once commanded with absolute authority, began to show signs of aging. Like a great king who had ruled for centuries, his power waned, and his children were ready to take his place. Even the greatest rulers must face time, and Ra was no exception. He withdrew from the earth, ascending to the heavens to become the sun itself, watching over the world from above. But his departure left a power vacuum. Who would rule in his place? Osiris, wise and just, was the natural choice. He took the throne and became the first pharaoh, teaching humanity agriculture, laws, and civilization itself. He brought order where there had once been chaos, just as Ra had done before him. But power, as history often teaches us, is never uncontested. And in the shadows, someone was waiting, jealous, ambitious, and eager to claim the throne for himself. Seth, the god of storms and destruction, saw his brother Osiris not as a king, but as an obstacle. Chaos cannot stand to be ruled by order, and Seth was nothing if not the embodiment of chaos itself. So he devised a plan, one that would shake the foundation of Egyptian mythology forever. Osiris, in all his wisdom, never saw the betrayal coming, and what came next would send shockwaves through both the realm of the gods and the world of men. Formation of Egypt with Osiris on the throne, the world entered a golden age. He was not just a king, he was a teacher, a guide, a bringer of civilization. Before his rule, humanity was no different from wild animals, wandering aimlessly, knowing nothing of agriculture, laws, or even how to honor the gods. But Osiris changed everything. He taught people how to cultivate the land, turning barren fields into thriving farms. He showed them how to build temples, offering a bridge between mortals and the divine. Under his reign, Egypt flourished, its people no longer struggling to survive, but thriving under the first true kingdom. Beside Osiris stood Isis, his devoted wife and sister. She was more than just a queen. She was the embodiment of wisdom, magic, and protection. If Osiris was the sun that nourished the land, Isis was the moon that guided it through the darkness. She was the keeper of sacred knowledge, the protector of women, and the mother of all healing spells. Her magic was legendary, said to be more powerful than even Ra's. In Egyptian mythology, wisdom and power often went hand in hand, and Isis wielded both with grace. She didn't just stand behind Osiris, she ruled alongside him, ensuring that Egypt remained prosperous and just. But no kingdom is without enemies, and no ruler is without rivals. Enter Seth, Osiris's brother and the embodiment of storms, deserts, and chaos. Unlike Osiris, who nurtured civilization, Seth thrived on destruction. He represented the harsh, untamed forces of nature, the scorching heat of the desert, the howling winds of a sandstorm, the unpredictability of wild beasts. In many ways, he was a necessary force. Just as life needs death, order needs chaos. But Seth was not content to simply exist. He wanted to rule. And as he watched Osiris's influence grow, so did his resentment. Nephthys, Seth's wife and Isis's sister, was a shadowy figure between the two brothers. She was not as famous as Isis, nor as powerful as Osiris, but she had a role that was just as vital. She was the goddess of mourning, the silent guardian of the dead, a figure who stood at the crossroads of life and afterlife. Some say she loved Osiris in secret, others say she simply pitied him. Either way, she would later play an unexpected role in the events to come. For now, she remained in the background, watching as the tension between Osiris and Seth grew. The kingdom Osiris built was unlike anything before it. It was not just a land of people, but a sacred connection between the divine and mortal worlds. In Egyptian mythology, Egypt was not merely a place. It was a reflection of cosmic balance, a land where the gods walked among men, where the Nile was the bloodline of creation, and where the pharaoh was more than a ruler. He was a god on earth. Osiris embodied this divine kingship, ensuring that the people honored Ma'at, the principle of truth, balance, and justice. But balance is always fragile, and Seth was about to shatter it. Seth, watching from the shadows, grew more furious with each passing day. To him, Osiris was weak, too focused on peace and prosperity to recognize the threat standing right in front of him. Power, Seth believed, belonged to the strong, to those who seized it, not those who waited for it to be given. And so, in the darkness of his heart, he began plotting. He would not merely challenge Osiris, he would erase him. He would tear down everything his brother had built and claim Egypt for himself. And so, a plan was set in motion. A plan so cunning, so precise that Osiris, wise as he was, never saw it coming. It would begin with a gift, a beautiful, inescapable trap. It would end with betrayal, death, and the rise of darkness. Betrayal of Seth. The seeds of betrayal were planted long before Osiris even suspected danger. Seth, cunning and ruthless, knew that brute force alone wouldn't be enough to overthrow his brother. Osiris was beloved by the gods and mortals alike. His rule was just, his wisdom unmatched. But every ruler has a weakness, and Osiris's was his trust. He believed in harmony, in family, in the sacred bonds between gods. And so, when Seth invited him to a great banquet, Osiris did not hesitate. It was a celebration, after all. What reason would he have to suspect treachery? But that night, beneath the golden glow of flickering torches, a masterful deception was about to unfold. At the center of the grand feast stood an exquisite coffin, unlike anything the world had ever seen. It was carved from the richest wood, adorned with gold and precious stones fit for a king. Seth, ever the showman, announced a game. Whoever fit perfectly inside the coffin would be gifted this magnificent prize. The gods laughed, amused by such a spectacle. One by one they lay inside, only to find it too big or too small. Then came Osiris's turn. Smiling, unaware of his brother's sinister intent, he stepped inside. And in that moment, as soon as his body touched the interior, Seth's trap was sprung. In an instant, Seth's allies rushed forward, slamming the lid shut. Nails were driven deep, the seams sealed with molten lead. The laughter turned to gasps, to shouts of horror, but it was too late. Osiris, the great king, the bringer of civilization, had been sealed alive inside a tomb of his own making. The banquet hall erupted into chaos, but Seth was unmoved. With a cruel smile, he and his followers lifted the coffin and carried it away, not to be buried with honor, but to be discarded like refuse. He would not allow Osiris to rest in peace. He would erase him. With the strength of a god, Seth hurled the coffin into the Nile. The river, sacred and eternal, carried Osiris away, far from his kingdom, far from those who loved him. It drifted for days, swept by the currents, until finally, it reached the shores of Byblos, a distant land beyond Egypt's borders. There, the coffin became lodged in the roots of a great tree, and over time, the tree grew around it, enveloping it completely. The once mighty ruler of Egypt was now trapped within the heart of nature itself, lost to the world. Back in Egypt, Seth wasted no time declaring himself the new king. But power gained through treachery is never stable. Though he had taken the throne, he had not won the hearts of the people. Fear and violence may silence opposition, but they do not inspire loyalty. The land itself seemed to resist him. Crops withered, storms raged, and the once prosperous kingdom began to decline. Order had been replaced by chaos, and deep in the shadows, whispers of resistance began to rise. For though Osiris was gone, His legacy was not yet extinguished. Among those who mourned, none grieved more than Isis. The loss of her husband was more than a personal tragedy. It was an affront to the very balance of the world. But grief was not the end of her story. In Egyptian mythology, Isis was no passive figure. She was a force of nature, a goddess whose power lay in wisdom, persistence, and magic beyond comprehension. She would not accept this fate. She would not allow Seth's treachery to stand. And so, with unwavering resolve, she set out on a journey. She would find Osiris. She would bring him back. Her quest would take her to the ends of the earth, through trials of mind and spirit, through encounters with gods and mortals alike. She would search the land, follow the whispers of the wind, and unravel the mysteries of death itself. And with her, unseen yet growing, was another force, one that would soon challenge Seth's stolen throne. A child, conceived in secrecy, waiting for the moment to rise. His name would be Horus, and his destiny was already written in the stars. Resurrection of Osiris-Isis journey was one of devotion, determination, and magic. She scoured the land, seeking any trace of Osiris, listening to whispers carried by the wind, following the murmurs of the river. After an arduous search, she finally discovered his coffin, now hidden within the great tree in Byblos. The tree had grown so massive, so sacred, that a foreign king had cut it down and used it as a pillar in his palace. Imagine the irony. Osiris, once the ruler of Egypt, now unknowingly holding up the halls of another king. But Isis was not one to be deterred. Disguised as a mere mortal, she entered the court of Byblos, weaving her magic and winning favor with the queen. Soon she revealed her divine nature, and with great reverence the king allowed her to reclaim the coffin. She brought Osiris's body back to Egypt, hiding it in the marshes of the Nile. But her task was far from over. Seth, ever watchful, discovered the hidden body, and his rage was boundless. He would not allow his brother even the dignity of a peaceful death. In a fit of fury, he tore Osiris apart, scattering his body across the land. Each piece was cast into a different corner of Egypt, a final act of destruction meant to ensure Osiris could never return. But Seth underestimated Isis. He misunderstood the depth of her power, the resilience of her love, and the boundless reach of her magic. Isis, along with her sister Nephthys, began the impossible task of gathering Osiris's remains. Piece by piece, they traveled across Egypt, scouring deserts, rivers, and temples, retrieving every fragment of his divine form. This was no mere collection of relics. This was an act of defiance, a declaration that Seth's cruelty would not be the end of. Osiris. The gods watched in awe as she worked, her determination unwavering. And when she had gathered all but one piece, the sacred phallus lost to the depths of the Nile, she did not despair. Instead, she crafted a new one through magic, proving that even in loss, creation could still triumph. But collecting the body was only the beginning. The art of resurrection was known to only a few, and one of them was Anubis, the god of mummification. It was he who taught the first rituals of embalming, wrapping Osiris in sacred linens, anointing him with oils, whispering the prayers that would bridge the gap between life and death. This was the first true mummification, the divine act that would become the foundation of Egyptian funerary practices for millennia. Through these rites, Osiris was reborn, not as a living god among men, but as something even greater, the ruler of the underworld. His resurrection was not a return to the throne of Egypt, but an ascension to a new realm. In Egyptian mythology, death was not an end, but a transformation. Osiris now ruled over the afterlife, guiding souls through the perilous journey beyond. He became the judge of the dead, weighing hearts against the feather of Maat to determine their fate. Those who lived justly were granted paradise. Those who lived in corruption faced obliteration. Osiris, once the king of the living, had become the eternal guardian of the dead. But Isis's journey was not for nothing. Before Osiris fully departed to the underworld, she used her magic to conceive a child, a son who would carry his father's legacy, who would challenge Seth and reclaim Egypt's throne. His name was Horus, and from the moment of his birth, his destiny was set. Hidden in the marshes, raised in secrecy, he was trained in combat, wisdom, and strategy. His mother had given him life, but his father's spirit lived within him. He would be the avenger, the warrior, the heir to Egypt's divine throne. Seth had won a battle, but the war was far from over. Horus would grow, his strength increasing with each passing day, his heart burning with the fire of justice. One day, he would emerge from the shadows and challenge the usurper. One day, the rightful king would return, and when that day came, the gods themselves would bear witness to the greatest battle in Egyptian mythology. Battle for the throne. Horus grew up in secrecy, hidden away in the marshes of the Nile, far from Seth's reach. But he was not a child of peace. He was born for war. From the moment he could walk, he trained. He learned to wield weapons, to fight with precision, to harness the power of the gods themselves. His mother, Isis, instilled in him not just strength, but wisdom. She knew that brute force alone would not be enough to defeat Seth. This battle would not just be fought with words, it would be a test of cunning, patience, and divine favor. And so when Horus finally emerged from hiding, he was not a boy seeking revenge. He was a warrior, a rightful king demanding his throne. The first clash between Horus and Seth was brutal. They met as equals, two gods locked in a struggle that would shake the foundations of the world. Their battle raged across Egypt, through deserts and temples, into the very waters of the Nile. At one point, they transformed into massive hippos, thrashing and roaring, nearly tearing the river apart. For 3 days and nights they fought beneath the waves, their strength evenly matched. But Isis, ever watchful, could not bear to see her son in danger. With her magic, she struck Seth with a harpoon, hoping to end the battle. But Horus, filled with honor and rage, saw this as an insult. He wanted to win by his own hand. Seth, always cunning, took advantage of Horus's frustration. He changed tactics, using trickery and deceit to turn the gods against his nephew. He claimed that Horus was too young, too reckless to rule. He challenged him not just in combat, but in divine trials, pushing him through impossible tests, hoping he would fail. One such trial was a race across the Nile. Both gods built boats, but Seth, always playing dirty, made his out of stone and tricked the others into believing it was wood. When Horus exposed his deception, the gods laughed, but the trial continued. Each battle, each test, dragged on for years, stretching into decades. The war between Horus and Seth lasted 80 years. Imagine that. Entire generations of mortals were born and died while the gods waged their endless struggle. The heavens trembled, the earth split, and yet no victor emerged. Even the gods themselves were divided. Some supported Horus, believing in his rightful claim. Others sided with Seth, arguing that strength, not birthright, determined a ruler. It was not just a battle between two gods. It was a battle of ideologies, a question of what kind of leader should rule Egypt. Order or chaos, justice or power. At one point, Seth's treachery reached new heights. He invited Horus to his home for a supposed peace offering, but in the dead of night he tried to blind him, gouging out his eye. But Horus was not so easily broken. His lost eye was restored by Thoth, the god of wisdom, and it became something greater, a symbol of protection, healing, and divine sight. The eye of Horus would go on to be one of the most powerful symbols in Egyptian mythology, a mark of strength, born from suffering. In the end, the gods had seen enough. They gathered in council, presided over by Ra himself, and demanded a final decision. The trials had proven Horus's worth. His strength was undeniable, his wisdom tempered by hardship. Even the gods who once sided with Seth could no longer deny it. Horus was the rightful king. Seth, defeated, was cast down, stripped of his power. Some say he was exiled to the desert, forever a god of storms and chaos. Others claim he was given new role, aiding Ra in his nightly battle against the serpent Apophis. But one thing was certain: his reign over Egypt was over. And so, after 80 years of struggle, Horus was finally crowned pharaoh. But his story was not over. His rule would shape the destiny of Egypt itself. And with his coronation, a new belief took hold, one that would last for thousands of years, that every pharaoh was the living incarnation of Horus, the bridge between gods and men. Horus becomes pharaoh. The moment Horus was crowned pharaoh, the world shifted. His reign was not just the triumph of a god over his enemy. It was the fulfillment of divine order, the restoration of balance. In Egyptian mythology, kings were not mere rulers. They were the living embodiment of the gods, chosen to maintain Ma'at, the principle of truth, harmony, and justice. With Horus on the throne, Egypt was no longer a land of war and division. It was a kingdom reborn, a place where the heavens and the earth were once again in alignment. But the scars of battle remained. The echoes of his struggle with Seth would shape the kingdom for generations to come. Horus did not rule alone. Beside him stood Isis, his mother, the true architect of his victory. She was more than just the goddess of magic. She was the unseen force that had guided Egypt through its darkest days. If Horus was the falcon soaring in the sky, Isis was the wind beneath his wings. She had ensured his survival, trained him for battle, and orchestrated his rise to power. And now, as Queen Mother, her wisdom would guide his rule. It was a reminder that power was not only about strength, it was about knowledge, patience, and the ability to see beyond the immediate battle. But what of Seth? Even in defeat, chaos could not be destroyed. In some versions of the myth, Horus banished Seth to the desert, where he would remain a god of storms, foreigners, and the untamed, wilds. In others, he was given a role within the cosmic cycle, helping Ra defend the world against Apophis, the great serpent of chaos. This was the nature of the gods. No force, no matter how dark, was ever truly erased. Seth was a necessary evil, a reminder that even in a world of order, destruction must always exist. The struggle between Horus and Seth was not just history. It was a reflection of life itself. With Horus as king, a divine truth was established. Every pharaoh who followed was believed to be his earthly manifestation. The kings of Egypt did not simply rule in his name. They were his living presence, his successors in an unbroken lineage stretching across time. When a pharaoh sat on the throne, it was Horus himself who ruled. And when that pharaoh died, he became Osiris, king of the underworld, ensuring that the cycle of life, death, and rebirth continued. This was the ultimate foundation of Egyptian kingship. Each ruler was part of a divine story, a sacred duty passed down from the gods themselves. But divine right alone was not enough to rule. Horus had inherited a kingdom still bearing the wounds of war. The battle with Seth had torn the land apart, and now it was up to him to restore what had been lost. He re-established the laws of Ma'at, ensuring justice for both gods and men. He rebuilt temples, honored the gods, and strengthened the bond between the mortal and the divine. And above all, he set an example, one that would define Egypt's rulers for thousands of years. To be pharaoh was not just to hold power, it was to be the guardian of balance, the protector of Ma'at, the bridge between heaven and earth. One of Horus's greatest contributions was ensuring that Egypt would never again fall into chaos. He established traditions, laws, and religious rites that reinforced the idea that the throne was sacred. In Egyptian mythology, every detail of life, from the flooding of the Nile to the movement of the stars, was connected to the divine. And with Horus at the helm, Egypt became not just kingdom, but a living reflection of the heavens. The land was stable, the people flourished, and the gods were honored as they had been in the golden age of Osiris. But no victory is ever absolute. The struggle between order and chaos did not end with Horus's ascension. It was an eternal cycle, played out in the rise and fall of kings, in the floods of the Nile, in the very breath of the people. Pharaohs would come and go, dynasties would rise and crumble, but the myth of Horus and Seth would remain. And as long as Egypt stood, as long as the temples bore their names, the gods would continue their story. And beyond the throne, beyond the mortal world, another god still watched, one whose role was both vital and mysterious. His name was Ra, and though his time as supreme ruler had passed, his journey was far from over. The role of Ra, the great sun god, had once ruled over all things. He was the first to bring light into the darkness, the force that set creation into motion. But the world had changed. His descendants now governed the earth, and the balance of power had shifted. Yet, in Egyptian mythology, no god was ever truly cast aside. Ra's role had simply evolved. He was no longer just a ruler. He had become a traveler, a guardian of the cosmic cycle. Every day he rose in the sky, bringing life to the world. And every night he embarked on a far more perilous journey, one that would determine whether the world saw another dawn. As the sun set and darkness covered the land, Ra descended into the Duat, the vast and mysterious underworld. This was no ordinary passage. It was a nightly battle for existence itself. The Duat was a realm of dangers, filled with spirits, divine trials, and monstrous beings. But none were more feared than Apophis, the great serpent of chaos. Unlike Seth, who represented destruction with purpose, Apophis was something far worse, pure, mindless oblivion. If he succeeded in devouring Ra, the sun would never rise again. The world would be swallowed by eternal darkness, and existence itself would collapse. But Ra did not travel alone. His divine solar bark, the Manjet, was manned by powerful gods who aided him in his nightly struggle. Seth, the god who had once been an enemy of Horus, now played a vital role. Standing at the bow, wielding a great spear, he fought back Apophis with raw force. This was the paradox of Seth, the god of storms, chaos, and destruction, yet also the one who ensured that chaos never won. His betrayal of Osiris had cast him into disgrace, but in the underworld, he found his redemption. As Ra journeyed through the 12 regions of the Duat, he encountered the souls of the dead, including the great pharaohs who had passed on. They sought judgment, guidance, and renewal. Osiris, now the ruler of the underworld, presided over the dead, ensuring that only the worthy could continue their journey. It was a reminder that death was not an end, but a transition, a belief that shaped Egyptian culture for thousands of years. The people believed that if they lived justly, they too would join Ra on his eternal voyage, moving through the afterlife toward rebirth. But each night, the battle with Apophis reached its peak. The great serpent would attack, attempting to swallow the sun, plunging the world into chaos. And each night, Ra and his allies fought back, wielding spells, weapons, and divine power. Sometimes the struggle was nearly lost. Eclipses, storms, and unexplainable darkness were seen as signs that Apophis had gained the upper hand. But always, Ra triumphed. And with the first light of dawn, he emerged victorious, rising again into the sky, ensuring another day of life for the world. This eternal struggle was more than just myth. It was the foundation of Egyptian belief. Every sunrise was a reminder that order had been restored, that Ma'at had prevailed over chaos. The people honored Ra with temples, prayers, and rituals, knowing that without him, there would be no life. Pharaohs, as his earthly representatives, ensured that the kingdom reflected his divine order. They built monuments like the Great Pyramids, aligning them with the sun's path, honoring the endless cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Yet even a god as mighty as Ra was not immune to time. In some myths, he grew old and weary, his body aging like that of a mortal king. The gods whispered of his decline, and humanity, once obedient, began to question his rule. Some say Ra, in his anger, unleashed Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess, a vengeance upon the world, nearly wiping out humanity. But even he recognized the need for balance. He withdrew to the heavens, No longer a direct ruler, but still a presence watching, guiding, ensuring that the sun never failed to rise. And so the cycle continued. Ra's journey through the underworld was a reflection of life itself, a battle against the forces that threatened to pull everything into darkness. But as long as he fought, as long as the sun rose, the world endured. And in the mortal realm, another god watched over the souls of the dead, ensuring that when their time came, they would be judged fairly. His name was Anubis, and his role in the afterlife was as mysterious as death itself. Anubis and the afterlife, among all the gods of Egyptian mythology. Few were as feared and revered as Anubis. With the head of a black jackal and the gaze of one who sees beyond life, he stood at the threshold between the living and the dead. Death, in Egypt, was not a simple end. It was a journey, a trial, a transition into another existence. And Anubis was its guardian. While Osiris ruled over the underworld, it was Anubis who guided souls to their final judgment. Imagine standing before a vast, endless desert, unsure of where to go. Anubis was the one who took your hand, leading you into the unknown, ensuring that you did not wander lost for eternity. Before a soul could reach the afterlife, their body had to be preserved. This was where Anubis played another crucial role. He was the god of mummification, the master of funerary rites. It was said that he had personally embalmed Osiris after his death, wrapping him in sacred linen, anointing him with oils, and performing the rituals that would later become the foundation of Egyptian burial practices. To the Egyptians, the body was more than a vessel. It was a key. If it decayed, the soul would be lost. So they followed Anubis's sacred teachings, preserving their dead, ensuring they could one day awaken in the afterlife. But even in death, judgment awaited. Every soul, no matter how powerful in life, had to pass through the Hall of Ma'at. Here, Anubis performed his most sacred duty, the weighing of the heart. In one hand, he held the deceased's heart, the sum of their actions, thoughts, and deeds. In the other, he placed the feather of Ma'at, the symbol of truth and balance. If the heart was lighter than the feather, the soul was pure and could enter Aru, the paradise of eternal peace. But if the heart was heavy with sin, it was devoured by Ammit, the monstrous goddess with the head of a crocodile, the body of a lion, and the hind legs of a hippo. There was no second chance, no forgiveness, only oblivion. It was a terrifying prospect, but it reinforced a deep truth. Life was a preparation for what came next. The Egyptians lived by the laws of Ma'at, knowing that their actions would determine their fate. They inscribed prayers in tombs, left offerings for Anubis, and ensured that they were buried with the proper rites. Even pharaohs, in all their power, humbled themselves before this truth. The great pyramids, the golden tombs, the elaborate funerary texts, all of it was a testament to the belief that death was not an escape, but a trial to be passed. But Anubis was not a god of punishment. He was a protector. His presence was often found in cemeteries, where jackals roamed, guarding the dead from thieves and desecration. Tomb raiders feared him, believing that those who disturbed the dead would face his wrath. And though he was often silent, his presence loomed over every burial, every funeral prayer. To the grieving, he was a comfort. To the wicked, he was a warning. His black fur was not a symbol of death, but of rebirth. Black was the color of the fertile Nile soil, the source of life itself. Time passed, Anubis's role evolved. With Osiris taking over as the ruler of the underworld, Anubis became more of a guide than a king. He was the one who ensured that no soul was forgotten, that no spirit wandered alone in the darkness. He was the bridge between this world and the next, the silent guardian of tombs, the keeper of secrets only the dead would ever know. His cult endured for centuries, his temples filled with offerings, his priests conducting rites to ensure safe passage into eternity. Yet even in death, the world was never without protectors. For in the mortal realm, another divine force watched over the living, one that was not feared but loved. She walked among the people, her presence bringing comfort and protection. She was Bastet, the goddess of cats, and in the homes of Egyptians, her influence was everywhere. Bastet, the cat goddess in the grand pantheon of Egyptian mythology, where gods wielded cosmic forces and waged wars for the throne of creation, one goddess stood apart, not as a conqueror, but as a guardian. Her name was Bastet, and she was the divine protector of homes, families, and all things sacred. Unlike the terrifying gods of war and judgment, Bastet was a figure of warmth and comfort. Yet beneath her gentle image lay a fierce warrior, one who could unleash untold fury upon those who threatened her people. She was the embodiment of duality, both a nurturing mother and a relentless defender. Bastet was most often depicted as a cat or a woman with the head of a cat. This was no coincidence. To the Egyptians, cats were not mere animals. They were sacred beings, embodiments of divine balance. Sleek, graceful, and ever watchful, cats roamed Egyptian homes, protecting them from pests, disease, and unseen malevolent forces. A cat's ability to hunt venomous snakes made it a natural ally of humans. And in turn, people saw them as earthly extensions of Bastet herself. To harm a cat was not just an offense, it was a crime against the gods. And many who made that mistake paid dearly for it. Egyptians honored Bastet not only for her protection, but for the joy and peace she brought into their lives. She was the goddess of music, dance, and celebration, a divine presence in moments of happiness. Festivals dedicated to her were legendary. Pilgrimages to her temple in Bubastis drew thousands, where worshippers feasted, sang, and played instruments in her honor. These gatherings were not solemn rituals of fear, but celebrations of life itself. Unlike other gods who demanded obedience, Bastet inspired love. She was a protector, yes, but also a reminder that life was meant to be enjoyed. However, as gentle as she could be, Bastet had a fearsome side. She was once associated with Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of war, a force of destruction so uncontrollable that even Ra had to intervene to stop her from wiping out humanity. Over time, the Egyptians softened her image, but the echoes of her wrath remained. When Bastet was angered, her feline nature took over. She became unpredictable, swift, and deadly. If a pharaoh sought her favor, he did not do so lightly. Oh, protective mother could become a vengeful warrior in an instant. One of the greatest testaments to Bastet's power was the mummification of cats. Just as humans sought eternal life through burial rituals, so too did their feline companions. Countless cat mummies have been discovered in Egyptian tombs, buried with great care as offerings to Bastet. Some temples even housed entire sanctuaries of sacred cats, cared for by priests who ensured they lived in divine luxury. When a beloved cat died, its owner would shave their eyebrows as a sign of mourning, a mark of deep respect that showed just how intertwined these creatures were with daily life. Bastet's influence extended beyond households. She was a guardian against dark forces, a shield against evil spirits and disease. Amulets bearing her image were worn to ward off misfortune, ensuring the wearer was under her watchful eye. Even today, her legacy endures. Egypt's love for cats has never faded, and her name still carries power in the echoes of history. In night, every cat's silent watchfulness, in their effortless grace and unwavering independence, there is something divine, something that reminds us of the goddess who once walked among them. Yet even the kindest protectors must make way for the passage of time. The worship of the old gods faded. Temples fell into ruin and Egypt itself changed. But Bastet, in her feline wisdom, remained untouchable. Unlike many gods whose names were lost to the sands, she still lingers in modern culture, her spirit, alive in the creatures she was sworn to protect. And so, the story of Egyptian mythology does not truly end. It continues, living on in myths, in symbols, and perhaps in the quiet gaze of a cat watching over its home. The gods of Egyptian mythology were more than just figures of worship. They were forces of nature, embodiments of power, balance, and chaos. Their stories shaped an empire, dictated the rule of kings, and influenced how an entire civilization understood life, death, and the afterlife. But what about you? If you lived in ancient Egypt, would your heart be light enough to pass Anubis's judgment? Or would you face the jaws of Ammit, lost to oblivion forever? These myths weren't just meant to entertain. They were lessons, guiding, principles for those who sought power, wisdom, or even immortality. So ask yourself, what role would you play in this grand cosmic battle? Would you be like Osiris, a bringer of civilization? Like Horus, a warrior destined to reclaim what was lost? Or perhaps like Bastet, protecting those who cannot protect themselves? Egypt's gods may no longer be worshipped in great temples, but their legacy endures. The Eye of Horus still symbolizes protection. The name of Ra still echoes in stories of the sun, and the jackal-headed guardian of the dead still watches from the shadows. Their myths live on, not just in ancient ruins, but in every culture that still tells their tales. Now tell me, what was the most surprising thing you learned today? Do you think the battle between Horus and Seth was truly fair? Or did the gods manipulate fate from the very start? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to uncover more hidden truths about mythology, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because the ancient world is filled with secrets and we've only just begun.